Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second panel of the Unscripted series, Rebuilding Sensory Worlds. We're so happy to have you all with us this evening. My name is Joung, and I am a light-skinned mixed race person of white settler and East Asian descent. I have long, dark brown hair with a middle part, and I'm currently wearing it half up in a little bun on top of my head. I have facial piercings, and I am wearing, what am I wearing? I'm wearing a dress. You can't see it's a dress, a button-up dress with tigers and leopards and various types of cats, large cats on it. It's a very colorful shirt. And in the background behind me, you can see that I'm sitting on a gray velvet couch. There are picture frames up on the wall, on the white wall behind me. And to my left, there is a wooden bookshelf with some lights on it.
Amazing. Hi, and I'm Becky Gold. I am a white person with freckles and green eyes and a dark brown grown out pixie cut. I'm wearing a button-up short sleeve shirt with green and black geometric pattern on it, and I'm currently sitting at my desk in my living room. So behind me, you can see part of a couch and a coffee table and a TV on a TV stand and a lamp and some pictures on the wall. And Ku and I are so pleased to be the curators of the Unscripted Cultivating Languages of Access and Storytelling panel series.
When imagining what this series could be, we imagined it as an opportunity to facilitate expansive conversations about accessibility in the arts. To us, this means conversations about how we tell stories, who they reach, and the depths to which they can be understood.
We recognize that access is complicated and in a constant state of flux. It can evolve and devolve over time, shifting with our sociocultural landscape. Navigating and claiming access for oneself and one's community is in many ways a form of resistance.
With this in mind, we wanted to hear from artists who are intentionally cultivating methods of storytelling and performance that provide wider avenues of accessibility, whether sensory-based, linguistic, or cultural, for Black, Indigenous, queer, trans, deaf, mad, blind, and disabled communities.
We feel that the panelists and moderators included in this series exemplify what it means to take up space, to move, work, and tell stories in ways that are accessible and meaningful to them and the communities that they are a part of.
I was just waiting for the sirens in the background. This panel series would not have been possible without the support of the series co-producers, Red Dress Productions and Theatre Passe Muraille, and funding from the Ontario Arts Council, the Toronto Arts Council, and TD Bank Group.
Tonight, we are thrilled to have Amanda Hyde and Rogue Benjamin providing ASL interpretation. Amanda is a white woman in her 40s. She has bright red and blue hair up in a bun and is wearing a black shirt and cardigan. She's sitting in front of a gray background. Rogue is a non-binary human with white skin, blackish brown hair, and green eyes. Their hair is pulled back in a bun and they have a black shirt on. The background behind them is half white and half navy blue.
We would now like to introduce tonight's moderator, Anna Camilleri. Anna Camilleri has been working with performance, image, and text for over 25 years, with professional credits including bookworks, performance and theater, and permanent and ephemeral public artworks and installations. Camilleri's book publications have been recognized with distinctions from the Lambda Literary Foundation, Association of Independent Publishers, and the American Library of Congress. Upcoming projects include May I Take Your Arm, a Theatre Passe Muraille and ReDefine Arts co-production upcoming in May 2021. Camilleri is artistic co-director of multidisciplinary arts organization ReDefine Arts, established in 2005 as Red Dress Productions. Anna can be found on Instagram at anna.camilleri.red. And with that, Anna, I'll now invite you to give a visual description of yourself and then introduce our amazing panelists for tonight.
Thank you so much, Ku, for that wonderful introduction. I am very infrequently online, but I can be found there occasionally. I'm so very happy to welcome folks here to Rebuilding Sensory Worlds. I'm really delighted. I am a white woman with brownish red hair that's a little bit longer than shoulder length right now. I have kind of cat eye glasses on, a black buttoned up shirt, and behind me there is a white wall and the edge of a brown wooden door. And that's really all that can be seen in the frame right now. I will invite both panelists to offer a visual description. And I think, yeah, maybe I'll do that in a moment, if that's okay, Leelee and Victoria. Actually, I'm going to invite you to offer a visual description now. Sorry about this. So I'd like to invite Victoria Mata to offer a visual description. Hi, Victoria.
Hi, good evening. I am a light-skinned mixed race woman in my 40s or early 40s. I have dark black curly hair. Tonight I'm wearing overalls with a black shirt and some earrings, daisy earrings that are white and green. And behind me, a number of plants and paintings and a large mirror and a couch. So I'm in my living room and there's a lot of light coming into the room currently.
Thank you, Victoria. And hi, Leelee. I'd like to invite Leelee Oluwatoyosi, Eco Davis, to provide a visual description.
Leelee here. Hello, everyone. Today I am here. I'm a mixed race, non-binary Nigerian Algonquin French human, and I'm wearing this tie-dye hoodie with a white turtleneck underneath. I think it's kind of gray now. It's so well loved, and it's tie-dyed pink and purple and blue in that order from my left to right. And I have curly hair that's in a high ponytail, and I'm wearing some earbuds in my ears, and behind me you can see the window and the light is going down in the sky, and there's nothing much else. There's like a tree, a lone tree, you can make out its shape. Yeah, nice to be here.
Thank you so much, Leelee. As we come together through digital technology, it is important, it's very important that we consider the legacies of colonization and white supremacy embedded within this technology and activities that many of us use every day. The equipment and high-speed internet central to ReDefine arts activities and Theatre Passe Muraille's activities are not available in many rural and Indigenous communities. Digital technologies also have significant carbon footprints, contributing to changing climates that disproportionately affect Indigenous peoples worldwide. I am in Toronto, Toronto. For over 15,000 years, Toronto has been a site of human activity. Ancestral, current, and unceded territories of the Anishinaabe, Wendat nations, and the Haudenosaunee in Dish with One Spoon Treaty territory that reminds us that we are all accountable to and responsible for this planet, and that we all need to be caretakers of the space we occupy together. The Dish with One Spoon has 3 rules. The first is that you take only what you need. The second is that you leave something for everyone else, including the dish. And the third is to leave the dish clean. As visitors, guests, and settlers in this territory, it is important that we take time to reflect on our collective histories as individuals, families, and communities, of how we came to be on this territory, whether it was by choice, by force, or displacement, and how our presence here impacts Indigenous peoples. I'm very happy to introduce Victoria and Leelee and to provide bios, some biographical background. And I would like to, if you're okay with it, Victoria and Leelee, to share your full bios that I have, because I think it's important to set the table well. And you've created so much beautiful work together. So I would like to just take the time. So Victoria Mata is Venezuelan Canadian settler in Toronto, polylingual choreographer, dance artist, and activist with a background in expressive arts therapy. Mata's career was first sculpted by pedagogic self-directed training, which proceeded with training under internationally renowned choreographers. Mata's sensibility to inclusion and border stories is due to her eclectic upbringing in 3 continents before the age of 15. Intersectional, multi-framed community arts and the abolishment of violence against women are some of Mata's passion. She has intricately weaved these themes in her MFA in contemporary choreography and foundation for some of her recognitions, such as being a recipient of Metcalf Foundation, a finalist of the Toronto Arts Foundation Emerging Artist Award, and 7 Dora nominations. Mata deeply believes in the arts as a core and tangible mode of sustaining and transforming the paradigms of oppressive tropes to populate a sphere of reflection, exploration, and possibility. Welcome, Victoria. And now
Hi, Anna. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm representing Theatre Passe Muraille's front of house. I just think that you might have some papers over top of your microphone that are just causing some loud noises. If you wouldn't mind just removing them, I think that would help everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Paying attention to that. I struggle with looking at the screen and reading simultaneously, so I really like paper, but paper sometimes is not good in this environment. So thanks for the note. I've lifted it. I'm really happy to introduce Leelee Oluwatoyosi Iko Davis's practice. Leelee's practice is rooted in foundations of contemporary dance and intermedia creation methodologies. As a disabled, transgender queer artist of Nigerian, French, Algonquin descent, working in decolonial frameworks is central to their research and creations. Being from Treaty 1 territory, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Leelee has had the opportunity to train and work professionally across Canada, Huron, Iroquois word for Canada. Their artistic goals are to merge performance and life, stage and experience, building a bridge to revealing the human condition. They can most commonly be found producing their own work as a solo artist. However, often collaborate across milieus. Leelee has had the profound pleasure of collaborating with artists and choreographers such as Jolene Bailey, Dana Danger, Raven Davis, Justel, Yannick Desranlo, Vanessa Dunn, Audrey Dwyer, Reginald Edmonds, Gambletron, Chloe Lum, Ryan McNamara, Kate Nankervis. Apologize if I got Kate's name. That was probably not correct. Evelyn Perry, Lou Shepard. I know Leelee, you can jump in a sec. Alexandra Tiglashar on works for theater, film, and stage. Leelee also works as a program designer, facilitator, and consultant in the field of social innovation and adaptive change. Hi, Leelee.
Hi, and Leelee here. And I should start by saying that 15 years ago, Victoria. Oh my gosh, Victoria actually created a home for me in my dance practice, and like a space to hold. Like, we were the only dance troupe of women of color, Mata dance. I feel like it was like almost 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So while it's been that long, and I always try to like cut my bio, like I need to also acknowledge Victoria,
Yeah.
because Victoria created that space all those years ago before anybody was ever talking about BIPOC spaces, was
Mhm.
already doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I'm really glad that you added that, because we're kind of talking about artistic lineage, right? And the connection between the two. It's a long history. Victoria, would you like to add to what Leelee just shared?
Sure, Leelee. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. As I was listening to you, I've just kind of gone down memory lane a little bit. But yeah, about 15 years ago, um,
Mm.
there's a group here in Toronto called Mata Dance. Some of you might know it. I'm sure some snippets of it still live on the internet somewhere. Probably very, very shaky cameras. So apologies for anybody looking it up and getting a little dizzy. But yeah, there was different members that came in and out. Olivia Davies, who's now in the West Coast, Irma Villafuerte, who's here in Toronto, Misa Parata, who's also here in Toronto, Grisel Severino, a dear Wendy who passed on a number of years ago. And yeah, basically a group of movers, passionate activists who had a lot to say with our bodies. And we took the streets and joined rallies and actions, and brought through the body stories, or echoed stories of various campaigns through movement and dance. And yeah, Leelee, that's where you and I first crossed paths back then.
Yeah, and this whole nuance of a bio. I have so many bios, and it's like it's so like I just don't even like them. Like, I want to honor the past, but
Yeah.
they don't really honor, because like you can't say all the things. It's
Yeah.
like this very colonial way of introducing myself. So, like really, like who I am is like that I'm making things, and I'm telling stories, and I'm trying to do it in a way that creates space for people to see themselves and experience. So,
Okay.
all those other words, and I honor all the people who like brought me here and walked with me
Yeah.
to this point.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you both. So, we're gathered here and I guess I feel like we've kind of entered it. This specific panel is called Rebuilding Sensory Worlds. So it's not a small question, but I guess I really want to kind of dive in. How do you engage in world building, rebuilding through your art practice? Leelee, would you like to engage with that question first?
Sure. um, when we're saying rebuilding or building sensory worlds, the first thing is we've got to talk about this idea of sensory. Whose senses? Which senses? How? When? Physiologically, uh, psychically, all of these pieces. So I just want to name, like, in the housing of this conversation is like that right away we have to name that it's built on so many different pieces and so many different experiences. Um, I'm personally, as someone especially like who is neurodivergent, I'm constantly personally trying to locate myself in my own experience, and then also as a queer and trans person in places, in spaces, in my own body, in my mind. And so how I engage in rebuilding and building through my art practices is first here. And then I'm just trying to like think of how would I want to have access to this? And how would I want my community to have access to this? Am I able to create forms and ways of engaging that many people can engage with? You know, that's where I start from. I start from here and then I go outwards.
Yeah, Victoria, for you, this idea of building or rebuilding through your art practice, like how do you come at that?
Yeah, one of the first things that come up for me is the continuum. So this kind of sort of the sense of that we will never achieve the goal. You know, in my practice, the points of access that I'm constantly negotiating and working with are the children of the families that I work with and the children of the artists that I work with. So childcare, who's taking care of the little ones if I want bodies to be in a room with me. And that has been present for a very long time. And only recently have I started including it in grants, a budget line item for childcare. So everyone who's listening, add childcare to your budgets. Also, this language in terms of I live in the Spanish and English world, but in that also all the different cultural languages within Spanish and English, and whether the communities of newcomer communities or more established communities, depending on the length of settlement in Toronto, which is primarily where I work in. So because the waves of migration are constantly changing, the different communities that are migrating to and from Canada changes, so do my modalities of including and creating points of access to my artwork, because the communities are changing. So those are two points of access that are very present in my work: community, or 3 points: community, language, and childcare. Not only childcare, but family care, because I also do work with artists who have to take care of other family members and require a PSW for the day, or require a particular type of transportation for their loved ones to be in the room with us. If I answer the question, that's what came out for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing both of you really talking about care and really this kind of mindfulness of who you're engaging with. So there's this notion of reciprocity, and Leelee, you talked about the continuum. Actually, Victoria, you talked about the continuum, and Leelee, you kind of pointed inward and talked about starting, from this place, like right here, with yourself, and they connect in the continuum. The self, and then our relationship to communities. I'm wondering if you would like to share an example from your body of work. It could be now or later or not at all. But we're using words, and I'm really aware that you use so many different modes in your creation, that this might be a moment for you to share, if you wish, to bring us into your artistic worlds a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's always interesting to be asked to share because you think what to share. But I think what I'll share is like my most recent work. I've been engaged in the last year in a project called Relocating regarding locating. And, you know, even some people who are on the call today have been in that process with me. And it's about centering, you know, deaf, disabled, neurodivergent, chronically ill, everybody who, you know, Matt identified folks who typically, whose conversations aren't always honored, especially in theater. And so this work that I am making is really interesting in the sense that I wanted to give people lots of options. So whether they just interacted with it visually from a screen, like they could choose to see the thing looking up or looking down right at me. You know, that there's some sound. So I'll share this clip from this piece, Relocating. It's just a short little 2-minute clip. And yeah, and it has subtitles. So I'll do that now.
Thank you.
So this is a snippet from when I was at the Banff Center. This is not the finished product, but you'll be able to see that in by August of this year. And yeah, this is just a gentle little piece, and the text is by my partner and collaborator, Raven Davis. And I'm just going to make sure that I'm also sharing my sound.
This is a hard thing that you are doing. The truth of the matter is, we are not invincible. We have breaking points. If we experience emotional and physical trauma as human beings, and when we attempt to redirect this suffering, as artists, our world shakes. We become overwhelmed and suffocate in the pain of our lives outside of the studio. The space to be free in our creativity narrows. At times it feels almost impossible to make work when it was the only thing we found solace in, healing. When we return to our art practices after experiencing trauma, we return with a bundle of new methods and tools. These tools seem new, sometimes unusable, because we're dealing with a whole new way of working and being in our bodies. These tools seem unworkable and strange at first. It feels like it takes longer to learn them. There are blocks that we stumble over at the same time as knowing we were once seen as trained and experienced in our practices. We now have to locate ourselves in this new way of working as artists. Our body remembers. Our body remembers.
Can you close the curtain?
Yeah, so that's just a short excerpt from that piece. Thank you. Thank you for your witnessing. One of the big pieces that I wanted to examine is values of endurance. We do this a lot in theater. We think, and I think someone mentioned it in the panel last night, which was like, why do we ask people to sit and watch a show and we don't let them go to the bathroom or leave the room and they're not permitted to enter back? And it's like this preciousness around that the art is the most important thing over the person. And so this work, it's got built into it the breaks that I need in order to allow myself to do a 60-minute length work.
Mhm.
And in that opens up this pathway for the audience to have their own experience and to also take breaks. Like it's not just like coming, because I think if it's going to be coming at people like this so fast and hard, that that should be intentional. And I don't think that people are always realizing what they're giving people.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's just a little example of how I want to deconstruct sort of the system that says that things should look a certain way and try to make it more accessible for everyone.
Mhm. That's really powerful, Leelee. And last night I also was fortunate to uh, be witness to the panel, the conversation between Yolanda Bonnell and Aria Evans last night, and um, you know, part of what you're bringing into the room really connects with the conversation that was happening last night. That it's almost as though in these art systems that we're in, the body exists outside of art. And so this is something that it's like bringing ourselves into the room, and our needs is, I mean, this is access, but it also is, we have bodies, right? Like and placing them outside of the room just doesn't make any sense at all. Thank you for sharing your work. um
Yeah, and
Victoria.
more than, oh, sorry,
No,
and
no,
to
please, please.
add, and more than having bodies, we are people. We are whole people,
Yeah.
and too often it gets told like, leave those parts of yourself out. That's like the
Mhm.
colonial way
Yeah.
that theater. Now, what artists don't want that. People don't want, like, we see how it impacts them over long periods of time, right? So how can we allow people to bring their whole self and honor that? So I
Yeah.
just wanted to add that. Thank you, Anna.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Victoria, would you like to share? Um,
I'm just going to turn on my light first because I realize it's getting dark.
yeah. Are we losing light outside? We are.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Leelee. This idea of the expectations that we have of audience members when they come to see art, in particular here in Toronto, and I can really only speak to Toronto. I haven't done a lot of work in other parts of Canada. But I always compare it to the theater world and dance world that I've been exposed to in Venezuela or in Colombia or El Salvador and Mexico. And there's a sense of noise being part of the performance. There's an acceptance of audiences. I mean, I'm going to generalize here, and I'm probably going to get like my feet pulled in the middle of the night, but I'm like, we are loud people. We as Latin Americans, and of course not everybody, but there is this, like, we interact, and the audiences in Latin America, at least the theater world that I've been to, there is noise in the audience. There's people chatting, sometimes too much, but it's just part of the ecology of what is on the other side of the performer, that then the whole experience is, there's a liveliness that I feel sometimes lacks here in Toronto. Often pieces begin even before you know that the piece has begun, because by the time you get your ticket, you're already in part of the show, and the actor that's giving the ticket is actually the protagonist of the performance. And there's just these like tentacles that weave out of the stage out to the space of the audience that I find really refreshing and informative. And so that influences a lot of my work. I'm blanking on the year right now, but I did a piece called Shift for Aluna Theater, and it was at the Daniel Spectrum. And I had a guest composer from California. She's a Venezuelan composer, Jackie Rago, who came and was the primary singer of the piece. But last minute, I was like, I can't have the audience just come in and the piece begin. So we changed the opening scene to start in the hallway. And it was a little bit nerve-wracking also for Daniel Spectrum, like for the staff, for the Aluna staff. But we all kind of took a risk and we said, let's try this. And basically, as people were in the lineup, Jackie started singing and asking them questions through her song, and then brought them in through her song, brought them into the space, walked them around the stage. And then at one point, she directed the audience to sit down. And while they're walking through the stage, there was a dancer taping, making the outline of Latin America on the stage with tape. And that came up for me as I was listening to you, Leelee, because there's this sense of once those doors open and we walk in, everything just kind of needs to pause and we can't even breathe. And it's just, we're not like that. You know, we have to move and chairs squeak and we have to stand and shoot, I gotta go pee. You know, like, why can't we incorporate that into the experience? And on that note, the piece that I'm working on right now, it's called Cacao, Venezuelan Lament, which is, it's a piece that stems from my own family history of our rupture of cacao farmers, and part of my family stopped practicing cacao farming in Venezuela. And so from that rupture, this need of telling the story arrives. And it's a story about two cousins that reunite. And through their reunion, we learn about cacao farming. And the piece takes place during the preparation of a festival that's called San Juan. And that San Juan happens in the middle of a plaza. And there are hundreds of drummers for 3 days, hundreds of dancers for 3 days, and processions throughout the town singing. And there's a lot of liveliness. And so originally this piece was meant, pre-COVID, was meant to be premiered in a theater. And then COVID came, so then we had to wrap our heads around it, and then decided that we would take it outside. And so right now our proposal is to close a street, reconstruct the plaza, and bring the performance to the plaza, and have some people will just be walking by getting their groceries and they'll happen to glimpse 5 minutes of the piece. Other folks will have registered and then come and stand and sit and move around. But because of this, having to reconstruct how we were presenting cacao, we brought it outdoors. And I'm not going back to inside the theater. Like, even if, like, post-COVID, I can't imagine having the need or the desire to bring a piece that is about people interaction to a space that is limited. So it's, yeah. Anyways, I derailed.
No.
Sorry, Anna, go ahead.
You didn't. It's such a beautiful example of your work. You know, I mean, you're talking about tentacles and about, you know, what you shared. There was this ritual of welcome, and then really creating the space. And I'm hearing from both of you this, like, these really immersive environments that, you know, part of what is so beautiful. I mean, I love immersive environments, and they also scare me. As a creator and as somebody who's, you know, who experiences immersive environments. But part of what's so beautiful is this recognition that everybody experiences differently. So people may enter this performance space at different points through different portals. And that's so beautiful. Like this, you know, this environment where that possibility is really real, made real, because there's no, you know, in what you just described, Victoria, you know, here's the door, here's the seat, sit down, and now we're going to begin. It's like, it's winding. There's the tentacles that you described are very, that's such a powerful image. And and both of you are speaking to it, but I guess I want to ask directly, in your creation process, in your making process, are you imagining audience or receivers and their experience of the work at the beginning of the work, or does that come, um, how does that happen in your process? That you start to, imagine what's called access. I mean, access, it's a funny word because it sounds like it's kind of outside of a thing, but it really is, a part threaded. So how do you thread that into your work? Leelee.
Why don't you go first, Victoria?
In this work that's in development right now with cacao, it's the piece. The piece is also going to live online. So there's we have a website because I have 12 plus years of research, that material that can't possibly go into the creative manifestation of the piece, or else I will bore everybody with a lecture. So as what we're imagining right now is that as people become engaged with the piece and with the performance, that there's different avenues of engaging with the website. Also, because of the language of Spanish and English, we're really going to try to stay away from printing booklets. However, we are looking into how do we get the audience for them to describe what they witnessed, versus us printing a program that says this is what you're going to witness and these are the people involved. So we're right now in a creative space of how do we have a story to tell, but maybe the story gets transformed or evolved as audiences witness. And I'm particularly really interested in that transference of information, and how can that transference be the program description versus the pool of words that I choose to put in a couple paragraphs and then force feed into people's minds. So thinking about this, also the piece is it's in Spanglish. So it's both in English, in Spanish, and then some words that are made up with both. So there will be moments of not fully understanding the text, but it's okay. There's so many other elements that folks are going to be able to access, that it's not just the text that two individuals are exchanging on stage. And because it's outdoors, people will just show up, they will be directed where to go, but as soon as they come into the space, there will already be elements happening. The performers will already be activating the space. Even the ushers, because we're going to have a number of ushers that take care of the space, the streets, and but the ushers are going to end up being performers themselves because of the nature of kind of the piece rippling out into the sidewalks and to the city edges outside of the performance space. So there's a lot of bleeding out and like rippling out that we're playing with, and that feel, at least to me, really important, as a really important access point to this piece, as a way of witnessing the art with at least the least amount of limitations possible.
Thank you, Victoria. Leelee, would you like to add?
Yeah,
To that,
sure.
yeah.
Well, It's so interesting because, um, I think one of the big things with disability justice is like understanding that like there isn't actually anything wrong with any of us, that actually society was built wrong in
Mm,
that way. Yeah. So I think like I think about really basic stuff like the space. Can people get in and out? Can they move around?
yeah.
The sound. What will it impact? Can people access it in whatever their needed modality is? The visual field. How will it impact people's brains? Like all of these things. So yeah, I'm clear like I'm making choices. There's going to be certain things that are going to have certain impacts. But the art, the nature of art itself as an intervention,
Mhm.
um, it's like, Victoria mentioned this thing about people starting the show, and it's like I like many years ago just was like, wow, I'm not really like you see this thing where I can watch a show and I can see when the performer drops into the work.
Yeah.
And my commitment is that the audience or the viewer or the witnesser, because audience, they're actually here. They're giving me their time and energy and space.
Mhm.
So they're not just bystanders. They're like, I'm also trying to engage them.
Yeah.
I think life is too rich right now for us to be storytelling with this fourth wall. Like, I don't think that's needed anymore. I get it. Some people want to still storytell in that way, but I don't think in 2021 that I need to be telling stories that way. And so I like to give people this opportunity to arrive. Let's arrive together
Mm.
and let me arrive and then begin and let you arrive and experience. Let all the thoughts of the grocery list and all of that stuff, like, let me invite you into the space,
Right,
into what's
I
happening.
think I had
So that is like one
police
of the pieces
order
that I
of this
just
is
give a
my
second here.
order, the 8-piece
Yeah,
family
can you
meal.
put your mute on, please?
And
Thank you. All right. So that is one of those things where, we need to just like figure out how we can be together and
Mhm.
be with what's really happening. Because, like, why make up these fake things?
Mhm.
It's like, this is a real moment in time. And so it's consistent imagining, reimagining. And like many years ago, I started doing research on the vagus nerve, before it started to come through in trauma therapy and polyvagal theory, all of that stuff. Like, I just knew that the vagus nerve was the largest nerve in our body, VAGUS, and that it was our center for compassion and empathy. It was the thing that made us, like respond.
Mhm.
So it's like from that place, I'm like, okay, there's these people who are here with me, and I'm interacting with their physiology.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
That's
Mhm.
part of it for me. That's definitely part of how, I'm embedding this creative access into my work, is like thinking about the people.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean it's that's very powerful. I mean, both of you are talking about creating spaces that allow people to arrive into the environment, and that includes yourselves. I mean, as an artist, I remember, um, for me that was a process. Like, it wasn't something that was a given, because I remember creating work where I felt like I was outside of the work or the experience, that there were these breaks, to these separations, and so part of the learning was allowing my disabled body to be in the space, creating work that actually also imagined me in communion with people. So I think this conversation of access, it does, Leelee, when we started, you pointed to yourself. It's like, this is actually the beginning point, right? Starting with like, am I in the room? Can I get into the room physically, emotionally, am I comfortable staying in the room? And if I'm not, can I go and come back, right?
Totally, Anna. And this is Leelee here, and it's like also this thing of including ourselves. Like that was a huge point for me because, in my bio it talked about I'm an artist, but I'm also an activist. I'm also a social justice worker, and I'm deeply committed to the evolution of human beings and how we change to serve all people on the planet, not just those who are giving way to white supremacy and like capitalism. So it's how do we include ourselves? It was like a light going on, like, oh, I say I want this change in the world, but I'm not really willing to take it for myself.
Mm.
So how can I then go stand for it or say that I'm going to go do this for all of these other people when I don't do that here,
Mhm.
So I love, Anna, that you also had that experience of going, because traditionally in the institutions, there's no space for that. In
Yeah.
fact, I've been told many a time that who I am is not welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this kind of points to this model of access that really needs to be, looked at and taken apart, because in this model of access, there are receivers and there are givers, right? So there's this kind of, this imbalance, but can we all benefit from access, like be, in kind of these lateral spaces, where there is room to enter. You talked about, Leelee, I think you talked about intervention, but it is kind of a question that I want to ask both of you. Do you think of your work as creative intervention through social practice, or as a type of social intervention through creative practice? Maybe that's too binary, but kind of how do you come at it? Victoria, what do you think of this idea?
It's for me, it's difficult to separate it. Like
Yeah.
if it's and I think back to like what Leelee pointed out with Mata dance. But then even before, even the reason why I got into dance and movement, it was a way of expressing without words, and words for me were limiting, and words for me still are limiting. And so I wonder about how, yeah, I think it's just it's this all the time. I have a hard time separating the two. I live in the convergence of the two worlds all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of layers. Leelee, for you, is there that element of layers, or do you kind of like, what is your point of entry in that way?
It's so funny because it's kind of like a chicken or the egg question. It's like I remember I was in a conversation with Evelyn Perry, and we were talking about queer theater because she was the artistic director at Buddies in Bad Times, and I like to tell this story because there's a line that made it into her play Kinnilik,
Mhm.
which was this: when we're making art, do we need to make queer art?
Mm.
Or is it just the fact that we show up and we're queer that the art is inevitably queer? When we're making art, we're bringing ourselves to it.
Yeah.
So it's like, what comes first? Well, I don't have to make, you know, art about my disability.
Mm.
I can make art as a disabled person and have it inform my practice and invite you into the world and the experience, right? So I don't know that one or the other comes first. I think that it's like this is just it's an emergence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess for me, I'm interested in the question, and just the discussion about it, because I have been working in community engaged practices for many years, and I think, you know, I'm sure that we all recognize that there are these classed systems. Art is a class system, and there are these, where there's a focus on community engagement, um, Sometimes I feel like the work is, it's funny. It might be a whole other conversation that I'm leading us down. But I feel like it is relevant. I think that to caring and creating access and being an activist and being your whole self has a place in our art making. And part of what has been coming up again and again tonight is that to separate it out almost doesn't make sense, that there are these layers, like we are these many things simultaneously.
Absolutely, Leelee here. And this is the thing, is that we're actually coming back to the way things, like, people will say, like, if we're lucky, post COVID things won't go back to normal because normal was messed up.
Yeah.
And it's like there's just that piece of like, okay, we're making things, we're doing all of this work together in the world, we're trying to find our ways forward. And why shouldn't we have what we need? Why shouldn't we actually be able to like give people an experience that feels good for them? And my next project is going to be deeply centered around care.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we, especially because in the stages and phases of the planet and human beings, we moved from the industrial age into the technological age. And then now what? Right? And it's unpacking all that. Pardon me, but like, I'll say Uri.
Yeah.
It's like the messed upness of it all. And now we're trying to reclaim, because we're at a place of like, you can't go back. If you don't start making some changes, there will be no human being. So it's also just like bringing it back to actually like, what is human being, and what does human being actually require as a whole soul, spirit, body, psyche, community. So I think that's part of it too, is just like, we're actually just creating modality. Who knew 2021 we'd be talking about care like it was a radical idea? I've always kind of rejected this idea of self-care, because I feel like it was like this white supremacist way to start talking about, like, bath bombs and foot rubs and massage days. But
Mm-hmm.
it's like fundamentally like, BIPOC communities have been engaged in care through centuries. This is not a new idea. I don't need a self-care day.
Mm-hmm.
I just need, I say that to you in the institution. Oh, I took a self-care, because that communicates, right? But actually care is like intrinsically a like BIPOC model of and way of doing things. And if you look at like colonial English settler, it's also there too in the servants, and the way the servants or the slaves cared for the masters or the kings and queens.
Yeah.
But it wasn't intercommunally in the same way, right? I probably shouldn't speak to it though, because I wasn't there. Small joke.
Yeah, Victoria, for you, this idea of care that Leelee is talking about, and that's in the room, it's how does that, how do you bring that to the post performance experience? So the performance has happened, the folks have gathered, the work is done. Like, what does care mean after the fact, if we think about access moving in all ways, in all directions, forward and back? Does that bring something to you?
Absolutely. I have, for as long as I've been on this planet, there's an event happens, and then you talk about it for many days. Funny example, my birthday lasts for a whole month. that's the culture that I've been brought up in. That's how my family members do things. That's how the neighbors, that's how the individuals that have taken care of me, that's how they've paved my experiences as a child, and then I have continued that as an adult. And so there's so much that happens post a performance. For my immediate team, there is debriefs, food, there is questions. There's a number of meetings that happen afterwards that are not formal. They're not formalized, but they just happen. There's always like conversations afterwards, or panels, or debriefs, even during the performance, the creative process, opening my doors over the creative process for what we call here open rehearsals. That is very important to me. I always gain so much information from what the guests that I'm inviting into the room, what they're gaining from the work, how, like, to just have conversations about what is in the room, what is happening in the moment, without this idea of like the final performance. And that has just been a very central part of my creative process during and then post. Because of the working with Latin American communities, there's a lot of conversations that are generated post a performance that, as a creator, I have to attend to, because I just don't know any other way. So it's conversations, it's phone calls, it's a lot of phone calls post the performance. So it's because it's also generations that writing an email or their forms of communication are not, they're not so technologically involved or centered. So even with like outreaching, it becomes face-to-face, phone calls. It's just going back to the human exchange. And that exchange happens post a production always, in many different ways. And that's how I've always worked.
Yeah, and I mean, and that is that's work, right? Like it's work. And so as creators who work independently and with teams and in communities, like how do you, not to be, I feel like it's important to talk about labor and, and money and being remunerated. We all need to eat and care for ourselves. So, just at that building and that access, and really thinking about access moving in all of these ways and directions, do you build this in to, at a budget level with projects? And I guess it's a question for both of you, of that energy, the labor of care.
I have begun, I've learned the hard way to include it. And I would say about maybe the last 5 years, I have very much reflected as much of the real labor in the budgets. And that's also a response to working with a really amazing producer that also is kind of keeping track of all the different little tentacles that are happening, all the satellite projects, all the side conversations, or the engagements, the coffee times, the visiting a group, the phone calls. And so it really, I have learned a lot from my producer, Allison Wong, who really has created a culture and within the way that I work that just tracks and makes sure that there is, and if it's not directly money allocated to the labor, there is an exchange of sorts. So whether it's gift certificates or transportation or whatever, and it looks in so many different ways. So I wouldn't even be able to conclude it, but it's definitely very much today, very much reflected in my budgets. It was not that way for a long time. And the consequence of that was me being very tired and exhausted.
Yes.
And I had to change that because I would then not be able to continue doing the work that I do.
Yeah.
Leelee here. Yeah, I mean, as someone who was a first-time grant recipient in 2020, like the context around grant writing was so disempowering for me. I was very fortunate. I spent the majority I have to date spent the majority of my career working by invitation. So I only just wrote my first grants in 2019. After I was invited to sit on those peer assessment committees and could learn about it,
Yeah.
then it became accessible for me.
Yeah.
I also think that like our communities, you know, we come like there's historically we've not had access to money in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of belief systems and conversations that keep that money away from us, but also that we just don't have a way into it.
Yeah.
And so there's these two things that like I think that like the context and then also like all the stuff that I'm bringing with me with all my angels and ancestors. It's like I have to contend with all of that stuff, and then there's the other piece of being like, listen, this is a dialectical time. I have to, on one side of the quarter or coin or whatever, card, stone, I have to know that I'm in a capitalist environment. And then on the other side is my anti-capitalist values.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, I tried to live as an anti-capitalist in a capitalist society and it near killed me.
Yep.
So I have to find ways to dance with both of those things at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just the piece of like going where, you know, so how do I honor that money doesn't fix all things, but it makes things easier for us? And that there is like skill and knowledge to share and exchange that has to also happen, that, you know, and gift community, like that this stuff all has to happen simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really important conversation because, you know, I think there is an expectation that some bodies more than others, you know, and just to name it, you know, racialized bodies, women, that there's an expectation of that care is just simply provided, that, you know, that educate, that, you know, that there's this process of educating without ever it being recognized that you're doing work, that you're teaching. So, you know, I wanted to bring it into the room because, well, because, you know, it's really, really important. And the grant system, the art systems are really hard to access for a lot of folks and to make sense of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Leelee, and I personally extend like if anybody ever wants any coaching on that thing, I had an inside seat, and so I'm super willing to like give that time and support any person, BIPOC, you know, deaf, hard of hearing, disabled, mad, chronically ill, whoever you are. If you have a project and you want, I would love to be able to, you know, support in that way, and I can put my email in the chat. And what's so is that, you know, we have to be able to access those things. We can't make our work without it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Soon we're going to kind of open the space to some of the questions and words that folks have been offering, but I guess I want to ask one more question, and it is, how from your, I mean, it's a given, but I really want to know about, from your perspective, how does multisensory storytelling enrich our ability to tell story or to create environments for stories to emerge in? Victoria.
The first thing that comes to my mind is that there's an assumption, at least my exposure of the dance and theater world, is that there's an assumption that people can hear, see, touch, feel, receive the art in the same way. And so there's almost an expectation of like, if the art's here, then whoever is witnessing has to come here. And it's in a very linear and it's in a like just very plain way of like, there's no diversity. Everybody just shows up and then you receive the art and then you leave. And for a long time, going back to a point that you made, Leelee, I mean, in our community, we've lived in at least in the last 21 years that I lived in Toronto, I have lived and I have loved and I have built with and I have created with individuals who receive information in multiple ways. So there's no other way for me to create work that doesn't involve that diversity, because those are my tentacles. So I go through a ritual of when I'm making work of like, I close my eyes and I just experience the work. And then I will plug my ears and I will experience the work. I will lay on the floor and I will experience the work. I will go really far away and I will experience the work. I will come in and stand next to the artist moving around and experience the work. So just, I will never know what it's like to not be in my body. But I want my body to be stimulated in as many different ways as possible, as maybe a possible way of inviting all the diversity that has surrounded me and that have been my teachers, because my community has been my teacher. It's the number one reflection of who I am, is the community that I walk with. And yeah, that's just that.
Absolutely. Leelee here. Yeah, it's like, it's also just that, I think it's so important that we are centering ourselves in our experiences. One of my mentors says this thing like, who's on the margins of what? I'm centered to myself. I'm not on the margins. I'm right here. And it's like this thing where like, even how we all will say, POC bodies, this and that. That's just one way that we've been programmed to other ourselves. We're not bodies, we're people. We're spirits, we're souls, right? And yet we constantly refer to ourselves and each other as bodies. No, it's just like, these are the types of things where I'm like, I just want to be constantly looking at, how am I centering? And I love that Victoria talked about diversity, because, when we talk about diverse individuals, it becomes a white supremacist idea. Diversity by nature is a relational topic that is only in play from a group, from a community. When we start saying, oh, that's a diverse individual, no, that's just you being white supremacist. Diverse to what? To your whiteness? Like,
Yeah.
So that's where I'm like, really thinking about how I make art and who my team is. Because the thing is that, if I can't look at my people who are around me and see the representations of all types of people, places, and things, then my net is not cast wide enough. Because then I'm just getting the same opinions and the same viewpoints that fit mine. And I'll tell you, when you try to stop centering language and stop centering the prefrontal cortex, holy, what gets imagined, what gets created is so incredible. So I almost reject that we have to sit here and use our words to have this conversation.
It's so rich. There's man, my brain is just sparking. There's so many directions to go in. There's so many threads I want to pick up on. I'm a note taker, and I've taken all of these notes. There's all these beautiful words. Last night I recorded all of these notes and I read them this morning and I went, what did I can't, my notes don't make sense to myself, but it's something about like wanting to be in the moment, to stay in the moment, or not forget. Yeah, I would like to, I guess, invite folks who are with us, who are listening, who are watching, to kind of flow into the conversation. So I guess it is kind of a moment to, I guess, open up this question and answer space or a broader conversation space. And I guess that can happen in a couple of different ways. So you can raise your hand using the raise your hand function at the bottom of the screen. And you can also type a question or a comment in the chat. And a lot is happening in the chat, actually, that I've been trying to track. Is there anything, Leelee and Victoria, in the chat that you want to kind of acknowledge or respond to?
I've not been tracking the chat very much. I wouldn't be the best person to share something from the chat.
I just want to like name that Angela, I spoke a bit about self-care and how it occurs for me as a like historically like non-POC concept brought in by like white feminism. And Angela named that it was action often attributed to the work of Audre Lorde, and it is also a radically political term.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, my sharing is just rooted on how I'm experiencing it. So I'm happy to reclaim that and to take it, you know, in another way. And truly, because once something makes its way into the mainstream like that, it's like we're just regurgitating what we already know. Sometimes that's how I feel. Like I'm like, are these my ideas, or am I just saying things that I've heard other people say? So that's where I'm like, okay, maybe there's space for me to take some more time with this concept called self-care. And find a way that it speaks to my lineage and my own history that resonates for me, but definitely not discrediting that resonates for certain people of all places, spaces, and ways of being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Angela, I really appreciate that you've been posting to the chat. And yeah, so you know, folks are definitely responding to, you know, financial insecurity is deeply rooted in artistic communities. You know, it's important to be, in order to make work, you know, we do this idea of the whole, not just our bodies, but our whole selves. We need housing, and we need, like, worrying about how you're going to eat tomorrow. It's very hard to make art from that place, right? Like, you know, to kind of set that aside, put that outside of art making as though it's like it's some, you know, consideration on the other side of the wall, it just doesn't make sense. So, you know, lots of folks are really, you know, also really resonating with this.
Not only that. Oh, go ahead,
well,
Victoria.
Yeah, and I as creators and as collaborators, you know, asking if, like, bringing food to a rehearsal, if we're ever in a space where, or in a project that can't support financially the folks involved, then just like does anybody need tokens? Does anybody need food? Does, like, just as part of, not as an afterthought, just as always as part of anytime there's an engagement or there's a collaboration or an invitation of into a artistic process. I mean, I'm still astonished how many times I get, because every now and then I'll say yes to a project that where there's no honorarium for whatever reason. Maybe I believe in the cause or whatever the reason, my personal reason for saying yes. But I am still at this 2021, like, I mean, I am very surprised when there's not even a question of because they're making it a series of assumptions of where I come from and what I'm bringing to the room. But I may not need that TTC token. But what if I was somebody else that did? And if the question is not asked, then that need will never be known. And it's almost like it's just transportation and food in the room always whenever possible, because we don't know what people's realities are. And artists it's very tough to live in the city, to make art, and to stay afloat.
Exactly. Again, it's Leelee here. And like Victoria, what you said is so fundamental. Like, number one, I grew up in a space and a place where I had to fight for every single thing that I got. And what I recognize about that now is that it was actually, I was so colonized by the system that I went back into community and I created harm in community by acting in that hard way that I had to present myself outside of community. And I never want that to be someone's experience. So if I can offer things like food and transportation fees, basic stuff, like, am I not softening the edges of the experience for someone so that they can actually be more in the room? Right? Like, I would never wish upon others the things that I had to endure just to arrive at this point. So these things feel like super fundamental. And sometimes often I wind up in situations where people will bring me in because they see I have something to offer, but then they'll fight me when I say basic things like, you need to have tokens and let's provide food with care. And why don't we, that's not the group we serve, but why isn't the group we serve? Why isn't it? Like, seems so basic, eh?
Yeah, I mean, Leelee, I think that speaks to a lot of assumptions about, that this, like, who's in the room, who's not in the room. Why are people not in the room? I think this idea of access, like where you have to say, oh yeah, by the way, I do need this thing. I need to come and ask you for this thing. And if I don't ask you for the thing, then I'm not going to get it. And you know what? If I have to ask and it's uncomfortable, I'm not going to ask and I'm not going to be in the room. Right. So this, like, these layers of access, how to make this something that's whole, right? That where we don't have to kind of step out of the line and say, hey, me over here, like, I need this thing.
Well, and people don't have to break themselves in parts to like, and you named it. How do we make the offer so people don't have to ask? So like, even in the theater and the presentation space, you have access to this, this, and this. If you need this, this is where you go. It's not hard to do. Does it take some time? Does it take some intention? Yes. But all that time is when we put time back into things, it brings us back to our human selves and away from capitalism.
Yeah.
So slowing down is not bad. In fact, it's fundamentally necessary for creating conditions of care.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I want to offer some folks are kind of adding their voices in. Becky Gold note here says, offering care and support from the start without vulnerable folks having to disclose their needs. And Jen Roy, so agreed. Acting from abundance to our community is so important, and seeing people offering more than TTC, Uber, taxis, direct rides to participants is so great. Yeah, thanks for the notes. Becky, Becky just said, thanks, Anna, for correcting my typo. I wasn't aware that I did it. You're welcome. So I guess I have Leelee and Victoria, if you were to, I mean, this is one of those, like, you're already doing it, but let's say for the purpose of sharing kind of in this open space, like, you're going to come together with other folks to build, a theater with the understanding that theater is not necessarily this one building or physical space. Like, what all is there? What is in this, the kaleidoscope of theater in this sensory world where we exist as our whole selves? big question.
Leelee? I'm still thinking.
Yeah,
Well, it's okay for us to pause too, right?
yeah.
Like to just take in, you know, what is it, the kaleidoscope of theater in this sensory world where we exist as our whole selves. What is it?
Mm.
You know, we're here on Zoom. We have 34 people in total who've joined us to witness and participate if they choose in this conversation. And where are we located geographically? All over, right? Okay, so we can see this as a constraint,
Yeah.
but for many people, it's become an access point. If you have access to the technology to get into a Zoom room, you now were getting into rooms where you just could not get into because you couldn't afford a ticket, you couldn't get there, you couldn't get childcare, your body wouldn't, allow you to come out of bed, whatever. Right now, you be here. And so it's like the kaleidoscope of engagement. Not only that, are we also just entering our quantum field in a much greater way? Right? We can see these boxes, but I can actually see you, Victoria, and I can imagine you out there in the grid in Toronto. And I can go, whoa, how can my field meet yours?
Yeah.
Mm.
In dreaming about these spaces, I think about the opportunity to back to the conversation we had at the beginning, but the opportunity to step away and still be part of, the opportunity that I could turn off my camera and still continue with the conversation if I were to get a migraine, for example. Or I just felt uncomfortable for whatever reason. I can turn off the camera and still hear you and see you, and then I can still participate. So these spaces where it's okay to step out or pause, as you said, Leelee, and not feel excluded from. Also, a space that stimulates but also cares. Space where one can stand, one can sit, one can lay down. Space where all different senses are activated and are intentionally part of how the experience is curated, not as an aftermath, not as oh, now we need to get this in order to make this space accessible. No, how can entry points and be engaged, be part of the design, be part of the exchange of who's witnessing and who's delivering the art.
Yes, Victoria, thank you. Leelee here. And this is the thing, that conversation that Victoria requires us to slow down, to take the time required to actually make the considerations. So that's why it's in direct conflict with capitalism, because in capitalism, what? Time is money. Right? And then you have people, especially arts administrators, who are often doing so much for so little. So then to ask them to slow down or to make additional considerations, I once had myself, I was engaged in something and we got fired simply for asking for new terms on our contract. Why? Because we were laboring the administrator, not because the terms were out of this world. We just wanted to divide our time differently as artists who were collaborating, doing a double bill. And we got fired for asking for that. So I just want to name that, like that piece around time is a huge access point.
Yeah. Well, yes. And embedding the need for time into the creation of work, and then Victoria embedding in access throughout the work as opposed to adaptations at the end of the making process. It's like, well, I didn't think about all of these folks at all. And now at the end, the work is made, you know, where there are these adaptations. So I think that piece of like really being in the room and imagining being in community from the beginning of the making process. Both of you talked about, yeah, Leelee, please pick up.
No, I just want to say, and I just want to bring voice to the chat and say that Angela said, how can we design accessible universal spaces from the ground up?
Yeah.
How can we envision a more considerate future? So I just wanted to bring voice to that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's such an important question, Angela, and it's the work that it's the work that we're all engaged in, and the conversation that we're in right now. And the thing is, we can't do it alone, right? Like, it is like building these spaces it includes others, it includes our communities, it includes people. You know, the things that I can build on my own are specific. But when I think about access and creating these places that really can truly not hold us, but we're in the room, right? This involves a lot of folks. And so this also is about our art systems, about the institutions, lots and lots of layers. And Angela, I might be going too far afield with your question, but it's like, it's a big question. And I think that, the possibilities and the answers are very layered, but Leelee and Victoria, like, do you want to kind of engage with Angela's question directly? How can we envision a more considerate future? How can we design accessible universal spaces from the ground up?
One of the things that come
Go
up.
ahead.
No, you go ahead this time.
No, you go. I'll write it down.
Well, you mentioned this, Leelee, is also, oh shoot, now the thought passed my brain.
It'll come back.
Well, we'll say it again. How can we envision a more considerate future? How can we design accessible universal spaces from the ground up?
You mentioned earlier, like, who's in your team? And this idea of like, we will represent everybody, or like, I don't think that's realistic. However, in our processes of creation, as we're building work, as we're thinking about where the piece will be, the content, how the art is shared, involving different voices that we are curious about. So if it's my work, there are certain access entry points that are really important to me, such as language, culture, age, physical. And there's other access points that are not at the forefront for me. And I have to be real about that. So I need to reach out to community to bring those voices in, because I need to understand what my limitations are, because I'm not going to be thinking about the multiplicity of access, all the possible access points, because that's not realistic. But I can know what's important to me, and I can also take a moment to identify what is not at the forefront for me and why. And if I want it to be at the forefront, then how do I bring people in to bring those voices and bring those entry points, and so that those entry points can be part of the conversation. So there's something about being honest with what's not at the forefront for myself as a creator.
Yeah. And I think this is such an important thing that Victoria is naming. This is Leelee, which is that in 2021, I don't believe that we get to claim ignorance. It's just that the world is too vast and too connected for people to act like they didn't know.
Mm.
That's just for me, that's how it manifests, especially in certain generations. So I think like there definitely has to be a space. And I also think that, you know, even the Black Lives Matter movement, as somebody who is often, you know, spent my life being identified as Black and read predominantly as Black, you know, many of the organizers will talk about disability and transness and like and the intersections of identity. And I think like we have to be very careful right now about like single issue politics, like that just focus on one thing, because Black Lives Matter and Indigenous sovereignty is very, very important, and self-determination and disability justice is absolutely required. So if we don't have the skills to meet those intersections, we have to find team who does, because we can't operate like it doesn't matter. And one thing that really makes a difference for me is, like Victoria said, it's hard to address every single piece of every single thing. But I want to do my due diligence such that I have thought through those things enough that I can create intention about whether I address them or not, and speak to that and be responsible for it. That's it. If I can't answer all the questions, that's okay, but I want to have at least asked them and created an understanding for myself of why there was a gap, why something is getting missed, and what I can do differently in the future. So that's a big part of it. Think about all the people it takes to make, like, in one mainstream theater show, like say Theater Passe, that whole team. As somebody who didn't have any resources, I became a solo artist out of necessity. I had no money. So I made the dance, I danced it, I designed the sound score, I cued all the lighting, I made the film, I put the projection on, and I, you know, wrote the text. And then I performed it in front of people and I showed them every single part of it, because that's just what I had to do. But let me tell you, not easy. And I don't exist in a bubble. That can only take me so far. So, right, who is our team?
Yeah. Yeah, the, you know, multidisciplinarity, it's I mean, there's a lot of terms that describe us, that describe artists that do a lot of different things. You know, I came to understand that I'm multidisciplinary, like far into being multidisciplinary. And that really did come from a place of necessity, of, you know, kind of creating with what was available and learning in lots of different ways. But, you know, Leelee, it is hard to do many things at once. And really, I'm just thinking about this piece about community, and that we've kind of, well, we've been in the conversation with community really since we started talking tonight. But I guess I want to ask, when in your creation process, are you thinking about needs? And I'm not talking about um like tangible needs, but about the heart of the work. Like, is that in your mind about, you know, I need this work, and, you know, communities need this work, or do communities need this work? Like this idea of need and that conversation from that place, like, is that something that is present for you? Yeah. Yeah, Leelee and Victoria. I'm for both of you. It's a big question.
Good question.
Yeah.
Immediately I say yes, but going kind of down a rabbit hole with that question.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say what's on my mind right now. So with cacao, it's very much about the intersection of labor, politics, history, displacement, culture loss, preservation of self. But it is important for me to share this story because through this story, I have gained a sense of myself back because my family was disjointed from our practice of cacao farming. So, however, there's a lot of tension between the Venezuelan community because of the different political spectrums. And I don't know that other Venezuelans will need this piece. And it's a bit of a risk that I am taking. But it's a risk I have to take. So that's what came up for me, that I know that for the Venezuelans that I work with and the Venezuelans that are part of the team, this work is important.
Yeah.
And the community that the Venezuelan community that is in relationship to the work, I hear loud that it's important. But there's a lot of tension within our community. So I don't know if I don't know. And and we will see.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Leelee here. There's a couple ways into this, which is like nothing I'm doing is so important that it needs to exist. And simultaneously, it absolutely needs to exist. Like,
yeah,
if I'm not going to tell my story or make these spaces, and I want to make the distinction between privilege and well-resourced. I've arrived in a place in my life where I have become a bit more well-resourced. And so because of that, I think I have a responsibility to pull people in with me, take them along with me, and also elevate like the conversation to where it needs to be, like that I can contribute to it. Not like I have all the answers, but I feel like I have a personal responsibility to, I can't just pretend like the things that are happening are not happening in the world. Been there, done that, didn't work, still ended up on the ground with, trigger content warning, not going to say it. So, I think I definitely think it's needed, because then the flip side of that is that art historically has been the impetus for culture to change.
Yeah.
Right? So as much as it's like, well, I'm not that important, like I don't have a sense of overinflated self-importance. And I could see that potentially what I'm doing could make a difference in some places, spaces, and like for some people. And then that's that. We can add any meaning that we want to it, or subtract it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I have, I guess there's a whole thought or a line of thought that was connected to that question, which is, that being the artist that I'll just speak for myself, being the artist that I am, with the the concerns that I have and the communities that I'm connected to, like, communities have come to me and artists I work with from a place of like, we have this need, we need this change, we need change. And we're asking you artists to to come to the table to work with us, to work on this change. So, when I think about need, it's like, yes, the need that I have for the work, and then the needs that communities have, and where I am in it. And I guess for me, this does tie back to access, because it comes back to wellness and about, a lot of this work that we're talking about, or when I'm talking about, without naming really directly, is like heavy emotional work. And so there's this piece, with access of like taking care of oneself. And I'm not talking about, the massage or the this or the that, like, but I mean like just being like in this, like being spiritually as well as possible to do big work.
Mm.
That
Yes, Anna, bless that statement. Spiritually being willing to do this big work, able to do this big work. I'm just now learning about sort of my energetic bank.
Yeah.
Like every day, I mean, ideally, it's like, again, this money reference is hilarious. I could use any other thing, but we all understand money. But it's like every day I have a certain amount that I start with
Yeah.
until I discover myself as infinite, but that's not where I'm at. So I have this amount that I start with, and every relational, right now, I'm getting deposits. I'm not paying out, and I'm not going in debt for this interaction. I'm actually getting deposits into my own spirit, into my own energy. But this is part of it, is like, not only do we need money to get to where we need to go and things like that, and like this thing of what it costs us when we don't have our basic needs met, but when we have to interact in things that take more than they give, our spiritual body gets depleted to the point where the first thing impacted is our creativity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I can't create, when I'm stuck and I can't create, I have to start asking myself, where am I giving away my energetic power?
Yeah.
And how can I make those deposits back into myself, or make them into other people? Because that also gives it back to me, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, it's a very real conversation, because it is needed, but it's also like, it's up to us. It's not just up to the other people to balance the interaction. It's
Yes.
like, who am I being about it? How am I showing up in this conversation? What
Yeah.
am I generating or not generating?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, we've talked about I've really enjoyed the conversation. We've talked about so many things, and I feel like we're just at the it's just starting to percolate in a way, right? Like, conversation. I like slow cooked food, and I like slow cooked conversation, but we've been together for a little bit of time, and we've started some conversations that I hope I hope continue in lots of different ways in our communities, and with one another. And yeah, um, Victoria and Leelee, would you like to add anything, say anything, words of kind of goodbyes or closing before we leave for the night?
I'd love to hear from you, Victoria, because I know you didn't share on that last round.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's okay. I'm in traveling mode, listening. Just thank you. I feel really this concept of depositing is resonating, because I feel like I've just been deposited into a great amount. And so I'm left with that. Those are some of the words that I'm left with, is that I feel full. And I'm very grateful for this conversation. Anna, thank you for facilitating the space for the two of us. Leelee, what a beautiful way to reconnect after so long, and a beautiful gift and surprise. And thank you, Becky and Ku, for curating these conversations. Very beautiful work, very important work. And to our interpreters, thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Anna and Leelee and Victoria, for your thoughtful and rich and careful thoughts tonight. We really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much, Ku speaking. I'm also feeling so nourished by this conversation, and I could just listen to you all talk forever. Thank you also to our interpreters, Rogue and Amanda. And just some last minute thank yous again to Red Dress Productions or ReDefine Arts, as well as Theater Passe, Muraille, and the phenomenal team of folks over at TPM, including Liz, who's been running the Zoom behind the screens, and Caredwin, as well as Rinchen, who's provided a lot of awesome panel support, and Angela for being our active listening person tonight. And so just a reminder that the active listening breakout room will be open for the next 30 minutes. And because of how Zoom works, we aren't going to be ending this meeting because that would end the breakout room as well. So we just invite people to leave on their own time. And Liz has posted in the chat a survey that will also be sent out to anyone who registered on the Eventbrite. So if you have a couple minutes and feel like answering the survey, we would appreciate it. Thank you all so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you all to the audience, and thank you for contributing your thoughts and engaging in the chat. I thought it helped to foster a really meaningful dialogue between audience and panelists and moderator. I just want to quickly mention before we all leave for the evening that our next and final panel of the Unscripted series is taking place tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's called Intersectional Stories. And this panel will bring together a group of deaf individuals to discuss the impact of language colonization on everyday life. And we hope that you'll be able to join us for that. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Becky and Ku, for co-curating this really beautiful series. And Leelee and Victoria, I really enjoyed this time together. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you. To everyone, good night.
Good night.